A missile that can fly from Kyiv to Moscow in under an hour, carrying a warhead heavy enough to flatten a city block. Sounds like something out of a superpower's arsenal. But it's not. It's not American. It's not Russian. It's Ukrainian. And it's called the Flamingo FP5.
The weapon is known as Flamingo.
It's Ukrainian Flamingo FP5 cruise missile.
Now, Ukraine has announced a potential major breakthrough in its weapons production program, testing its
Newly developed long-range cruise missile that is produced domestically by Ukrainian defense company Firepoint.
For years, Putin told his people the same story, that Moscow is untouchable for Ukraine, that no weapon from Ukraine cannot reach Moscow. Well, now that promise is looking bleak.
Don't let the name fool you, though. The name might sound soft, but in reality, it is anything but. This missile, born in the middle of a war, is Ukraine's latest answer to Russian aggression. It's not just a weapon, it's a message. One so loud that even Donald Trump took to Truth Social warning interesting times ahead. This pink-colored missile isn't just a weapon, it's a turning point. And it might be the unexpected card that finally forces Putin to the table. This turning point arrived on August 18th, when Ukraine unveiled something unexpected, a new cruise missile called the Flamingo. Developed by Firepoint, a rising defense firm, it wasn't a prototype. It was a weapon that was already rolling off the production line. Ground-launched and mobile, the Flamingo immediately turned heads for one reason: reach. With a range of roughly 1,900 miles or 3,000 kilometers, it can strike deep into Russian territory, covering areas like Moscow, St. Petersburg, and even parts of Siberia. That alone shifts the balance. But what makes this missile truly dangerous isn't just how far it flies, but what it also carries. Early reports suggest a warhead of over 1,100 kilograms, which is more than double the payload of America's Tomahawk. And while Ukraine hasn't revealed everything about the Flamingo, what we already know is enough to rattle military planners across the border. This is more than a weapon, it's a warning. Compared to Ukraine's earlier weapons like the Neptune missile or the Palyannitsia drones, the Flamingo is in a different league. Sure, the Neptune could hit ships and some land targets, but its reach was limited. On the other hand, Palyannitsia drones were used for short-range strikes, but that was about it. The Flamingo, Ukraine's new love child, is the best of both worlds. It triples the reach and packs a punch that makes it a strategic weapon, not just a tactical one. It's not just about hitting targets, it's about completely changing the game that Russia has been controlling. Now, before we dive deeper into its impact, let's talk about the name, because it's not what you'd expect. As you might have already guessed, that nickname came from its initial pink color. Yes, a pink-colored missile. You see, the first Flamingo missile was painted pink by mistake, but instead of fixing it, the team behind it leaned in and gave it the name that matched the color, the Flamingo. It wasn't just a joke, it was a tribute to the women who helped build it, especially the one leading production at the time. Firepoint CEO Arenya Terek even joked and said, "You don't need a scary name for a missile that can fly 3,000 kilometers." What's even more remarkable about this project is that Firepoint didn't just copy something from the West. They built this missile from scratch, using local talent and resources. Ukraine didn't need to rely on Western tech to build it. That's important, because it means they don't need permission to use it, unlike other foreign missiles that they've been getting from Western nations. Currently, they're producing one missile per day, but plan to scale up to thousands per year. This will be remarkable, because with enough of these missiles in storage, they alone could act as a deterrent to Russia's aggression. After all, Putin is bound to behave differently knowing that there's a missile that can strike him in Moscow all the way from Kyiv. To really understand how Ukraine pulled this miracle off, we need to look at how this missile was built in just 9 months. The idea for Flamingo started in late 2024, and by mid-year this year, it was already being tested. That's lightning speed for missile development. Most systems like this take 5 to 10 years. Firepoint, backed by the Ukrainian government, worked under pressure. Engineers operated from underground bunkers to avoid Russian strikes. They used drone technology as a base, borrowing ideas from systems like Bayraktar and added AI for navigation. Stealth coatings help reduce radar visibility. It goes unsaid that building this missile wasn't easy. Ukraine faced shortages in materials and parts due to sanctions and war. They had to source engines locally, avoiding import bans. Funding came from a mix of sources, including private investors and some alleged state financing. Ukrainians have supported similar projects before, and this one got the same kind of backing. Testing was done in secret, with reports suggesting that early strikes may have hit airfields in Crimea. The reason so much effort went into the Flamingo is that it was a passion project, one that marked a bigger shift in Ukraine's defense strategy. You see, throughout this war, Ukrainian cities have been bombarded from hundreds of kilometers away, sometimes by missiles fired from deep inside of Russian territory. These attacks aren't always tactical strikes. Some, if not most, have been aimed at homes, schools, and factories. It has been so bad that Ukrainian officials have called it what it was: just terror against people. This relentless bombardment, often with no clear military logic, created an emotional landscape of grief, defiance, and urgency. And it's from that soil that the Flamingo missile was born. Not in a government weapons lab, but in the hands of ordinary citizens who had never built a missile before. They came together not just to fight back, but to reclaim control, to say, we can reach you too. That drive translates into some serious firepower, which leads us to the technical details of what makes the Flamingo so dangerous. To begin with, its crazy range covers all of European Russia and parts of Siberia. That means it can hit military factories, oil refineries, command centers, and airfields deep inside Russian territory. As it is, Ukraine has already been doing this with recent hits, including the Ryazan refinery near Moscow, the Engels Air Base in Saratov, and the Tonenko refinery in Tatarstan. These attacks have disrupted fuel supplies, sparked massive fires, and triggered economic strain, with gasoline shortages reported across multiple Russian regions. And now that Ukraine has its Flamingo missile, the pressure on Russia's strategic infrastructure is about to escalate dramatically. The warhead weighs well over a ton, and that kind of explosive power can destroy hardened targets like bunkers and fortified buildings. Also, the Flamingo flies at subsonic speeds, under Mach 1. Now that might sound slow, but it's actually an advantage. It saves fuel and allows the missile to fly low, hugging the terrain. High-speed missiles are easier to detect, so the engineers decided to do away with that pitfall. The way it's designed means that by the time you spot the Flamingo, it's likely already too late. And even when you do spot it, don't think taking this baby down will be a piece of cake. Its guidance system doesn't rely on GPS alone. It uses inertial navigation with AI corrections, making it resistant to jamming. Tests have shown that it can stay on course even when electronic warfare is used against it. On top of that guidance, stealth plays a huge role. The missile's shape and materials reduce its radar signature. It flies close to the ground, blending in with the terrain. That's why some call it a flamingo skimming water. It's launched from trucks, which means it can be moved quickly and fired from different locations. That versatility is a big deal, because now Ukraine can attack Russia from non-fixed points, which adds to the unpredictability that comes with this weapon. It also means that Ukraine can launch multiple missiles at once, overwhelming Russian defenses. And as if all of this was not terrifying enough, the Flamingo has different payload options. The standard is a high explosive warhead, but there's talk of cluster munitions or even future nuclear capability. Now that's still hypothetical, but it shows the missile's potential. If things escalate to such levels, it's safe to say that it could be game over for Russia. The missile's accuracy is also impressive. Ukrainian media claims a circular error probably of under 10 meters. That means it can hit within 10 meters of its target, which is precise enough for strategic strikes. Beyond its precision and power, the real edge comes from how cheap it is to make. Currently, the Flamingo is estimated to cost around $500,000 per unit. This is actually a huge deal, because the Russian equivalents cost millions of dollars. That means Ukraine can produce more missiles for less money. It means that this is a scalable weapon, and that is bad news for Russia. But for now, think of Flamingo as Ukraine's version of the Tomahawk, but with just more reach and a bigger punch. It's affordable, deadly, and hard to stop. These specs aren't just impressive, they're a strategic threat. Russia now has to worry about strikes far from the front lines. That seemingly small change has a drastic effect on how they plan and operate from here on out. But like any weapon, the Flamingo has its weak spots. Production is still ramping up, so shortages could limit numbers early on. And launching too many could invite international pushback over escalation. Now, these aren't deal breakers, but they remind us that it's not invincible. All those features have Putin and his team scrambling. They're even downplaying the missile publicly, but the panic is real. Just listen to Russian propagandist Skabeva downplay it as best she can on Russian state TV.
The Kiev regime is circulating footage allegedly showing the use of a new Ukrainian Flamingo missile, or rather a missile that is not entirely Ukrainian. As an Associated Press journalist pointed out, the Ukrainian wonder weapon looks like the twin brother of British FP-5 Millennium missile, which was demonstrated just 6 months ago at the IDEX 2025 Defense Exhibition in Abu Dhabi. It was announced there that the heavy FP-5 cruise missile carries a 1-ton warhead that reaches speeds up to 950 kilometers per hour and can strike targets at a distance of 3,000 kilometers. Coincidentally, the Ukrainian missile has similar characteristics. This means that the entire European part of the Russia, the Urals, and even parts of the western Siberia fall within its range.
Russia's panic over the Flamingo missile exceeds what we see on the spec sheet. It's also about what it means. Ukraine didn't just add another weapon to its arsenal, it introduced a tool that shifts the balance. For years, Russia leaned on its size, its reach, and its ability to intimidate. But now, with the Flamingo in play, that confidence is cracking. The missile doesn't just hit targets, it hits nerves. And those nerves stretch across Russia's military, its economy, its politics, and its entire geography. Let's start with the military side. Russia's defense strategy has always relied on layers. Radar networks, air defense systems, and early warning setups spread across thousands of kilometers. But the Flamingo doesn't care about layers. It's fast, smart, and hard to track. That makes Russia's expensive defenses look vulnerable. When a missile can slip through and land where it wants, generals start losing sleep. And it's not just about one missile. It's about the fear that Ukraine can now strike deep into Russian territory, even into places that were once considered untouchable. That forces Russia to rethink how it positions troops, protects its supply lines, and defends its borders. It stretches them thin and forces them to prepare for attacks they never expected. That military strain spills over into their economy. Russia's military isn't cheap. Every time they move equipment, reinforce a base, or upgrade a radar system, it drains the budget. The Flamingo makes that worse. Russia can't afford to leave anything exposed, which means more spending on defense at a time when the economy is already under pressure. Sanctions have cut off key markets. Energy exports aren't bringing in what they used to. Inflation is creeping up. So when the Flamingo forces Russia to spend more just to stay protected, that's not just a military problem, it's an economic one. It slows growth, drains resources, and makes it harder to keep up with the demands of the war. Beyond the budget hits, the political fallout is even tougher. Politically, the Flamingo is a nightmare. Russia has spent years building a story of strength, telling its people and the world that it's in control, that it's winning, and that Ukraine is weak. But now, with this missile in Ukraine's hands, that story's gonna start falling apart. It's hard to claim dominance when your bases are vulnerable. It's hard to look strong when your air defenses are failing. And it's hard to keep public support when people start asking why Ukraine can hit targets inside of Russia. The Flamingo doesn't just challenge Russia's military, it challenges its message. It puts pressure on leaders, on the media, and on the system built around the idea of Russian power. If you're worried about how AI is changing everything, jobs, industries, education, even the economy, well, you're not alone. According to a Rutgers University report, 7 in 10 US workers say they're very, or somewhat, concerned about employers using AI in decision-making. 3 in 10 are worried about their job being eliminated by AI. Even experts agree. Many studies say that by the 2030s, 30% of jobs will be automated by AI, and 44% of workers replaced. That means you have to pay attention if you want to avoid becoming a victim. That's why we recently made a YouTube video that breaks down what's actually happening behind the scenes and how people are preparing, not just to survive, but to benefit from the AI revolution. And this isn't about becoming a coder or building the next ChatGPT. It's about understanding where the real leverage is as AI evolves, and how normal people are using it to build safer career paths right now. If you're feeling uncertain about the future, or you're just curious about what your options are, watch that video here on YouTube by clicking on the link in the description or on the card on your screen. Geography used to be one of Russia's strengths. It's a massive country, and that size gave it room to maneuver. But now, it's become a weakness. The Flamingo can reach places that used to be unreachable. It can strike supply depots, command centers, and infrastructure deep inside Russian territory. One of the biggest vulnerabilities is how exposed Russia's key bases have become. That means Russia has to defend more ground with fewer resources and under more pressure. It stretches logistics, slows response times, and makes it harder to keep control. And it's not just military targets. The Flamingo can hit railways, bridges, and energy facilities. That affects movement, trade, and daily life. At this point, Russia's size isn't helping Russia anymore, it's now exposing it. This vulnerability isn't limited to bases, as it hits their economy hard as well. With the arrival of the new missile on the playing field, Moscow will have to rethink its defensive posture. And the first move is predictable: throw more air defense systems at the problem. But that's easier said than done. Relocating S-400 batteries eastward to protect deeper targets means stripping coverage from the front lines. It's a shell game. protect one area, expose another. And these systems aren't cheap. Each interceptor costs millions, and Russia's production lines are stretched. Flamingo's low-altitude flight profile makes it even harder to intercept, especially when launched in salvos. 50 missiles at once? That's not a strike. That's a flood. The Flamingo's reach doesn't just threaten military targets, it puts Russia's oil infrastructure in the crosshairs. Refineries, pipelines, and export terminals are now vulnerable in ways they weren't before. And that is a serious problem. Russia's economy leans heavily on energy exports. Oil and gas aren't just commodities, they're lifelines. If Ukraine starts hitting those facilities, even selectively, it could disrupt up to 20% of Russia's oil flow. That's not just a blow to the budget, it's a shock to the entire system. The June strike on the Tuapse refinery with a smaller Neptune missile caused a fire that burned for 3 days. The Flamingo carries a warhead nearly 10 times heavier and can go much further. The damage wouldn't just be physical, it would hit Russia right where it hurts, in the pocket. The damage wouldn't stop at the refineries, it would ripple outward. Prices would spike, supply chains would scramble, and inside of Russia, ordinary people would feel the squeeze. Fuel shortages, rising costs, and job losses in energy-dependent regions could stir unrest. The Flamingo doesn't need to destroy everything, it just needs to make the economy bleed slowly. And that kind of pressure is hard to ignore. For Putin, this is about more than defending assets. It's also about defending stability. If the money stops flowing, if oil becomes harder to sell, and if the public starts feeling that pain, the image of control begins to crack. That's when negotiations stop looking like weakness and start looking like survival. The Flamingo could be the tool that forces that shift, not through brute force, but through economic exhaustion. Ukraine doesn't need to win with one strike. They just need to keep the pressure on until the cost of continuing becomes too high. The Flamingo's impact is also psychological. For years, most Russians have lived with the assumption that the war was over there, that the front lines are distant, abstract. The moment drones start hitting oil depots near major cities, that illusion collapses. Suddenly, the war isn't something you watch on state TV, it's something you hear outside of your window. And that shift matters. Fear spreads faster than fire. When people no longer feel safe, they start asking questions. They start to pressure local officials. They demand accountability. And in a system built on control and narrative, cracks in public confidence are dangerous. The Flamingo doesn't only strike infrastructure, it strikes the psyche. It forces Russians to confront a truth their government has tried to bury. They are vulnerable. For Putin, that's a nightmare scenario. Economic pain is one thing, but fear? Fear is contagious. It's disruptive. It's hard to silence. If the Flamingo keeps flying, it will erode the very foundation of domestic stability. All of this adds up to real panic. Not just fear, but the kind that comes when old strategies stop working. Russia is used to setting the pace, choosing the battlefield, and controlling the narrative. The Flamingo flips that, and it gives Ukraine the ability to strike back, to disrupt, and to change the rules. That is what makes it so dangerous. It's not about damage, it's about unpredictability. Russia doesn't know where the next strike will come from. They don't know what's safe anymore. And that kind of uncertainty is powerful. It forces hesitation, it creates doubt. And in war, doubt can be deadly. And the timing, it couldn't be worse for Russia. It changes even the manpower equation. They're already stretched thin. They're dealing with sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and internal unrest. The Flamingo adds another layer of stress. It forces them to divert attention, spend more, and rethink strategies. And that's exactly what Ukraine wants. The goal isn't to destroy, it's to destabilize. To make Russia question its plans, its priorities, and its position. And the Flamingo is doing that better than almost anything else. For Ukraine, every soldier counts. Throughout this war, Russia has had the advantage in sheer numbers. More boots, more reserves, more depth. But the Flamingo changes that math. With a missile that can strike thousands of kilometers deep, Ukraine doesn't need to send troops into hostile territory to hit strategic targets. It can do it remotely, precisely, and repeatedly. And that's not just tactical efficiency, it's life-saving. Fewer Ukrainian soldiers are exposed, which means fewer risky incursions, which means less attrition. The Flamingo allows Ukraine to punch above its weight and to project power without bleeding for every kilometer. And this is more than mere drone warfare 2.0. It's something deeper. It's an improvement. At some point in this conflict, drones changed how wars are fought, and now the Flamingo is doubling down on that. Suddenly, the side with fewer troops isn't necessarily the weaker one. Suddenly, reach matters more than range, and suddenly Russia's numerical advantage starts to look outdated. On top of this, it also changes how other countries see the war. When Ukraine shows it can develop and deploy something like the Flamingo, it shifts perceptions. It makes people take Ukraine more seriously. It opens the door for more support, more cooperation, and more investment. And that's bad news for Russia, because the more capable Ukraine looks, the harder it is for Russia to justify its actions. The Flamingo doesn't just change the battlefield, it changes the conversation. It gives Ukraine leverage, and leverage matters. Ultimately, the Kremlin's disturbance isn't just about what the Flamingo can do today, it's about what it means for tomorrow. If Ukraine can build this, what's next? What other surprises are coming? The fear of the unknown is part of the panic. Russia doesn't just have to deal with the missile alone, they have to deal with the idea that Ukraine is evolving, that they're not just defending, but they're advancing as well. And that's a scary thought for a country used to being ahead. So yes, Russia is in big trouble. It's being forced to play defense in a game where they thought they were winning. Its weaknesses have been exposed, resources drained, and confidence shaken. And the Kremlin is absolutely shocked at how Ukraine just isn't backing down. They're pushing forward, and with the Flamingo in their hands, they're doing it in a way Russia didn't see coming. Ukraine built more than just a weapon, they built a warning. And that warning is echoing far beyond the battlefield. Russia's allies are now watching closely, and many of them aren't comfortable. The Flamingo has changed the tone of the war, and it's forcing countries to rethink their positions, their partnerships, and their plans. Iran is the first one to feel the pressure. They've supplied drones to Russia, and their support has helped keep Russian strikes going. But now, with the Flamingo's range stretching over 3,000 kilometers, even parts of Iran are within reach. That alone serves as a deterrent, because if Ukraine wanted to, it could target drone factories or supply hubs deep inside of Iranian territory. That possibility alone makes Iran think twice. Supporting Russia used to be low risk. Now it comes with consequences. And when those consequences include missile strikes on home soil, the cost of loyalty starts to rise. North Korea is actually in a similar spot. They've already sent artillery shells to Russia and even sent some soldiers, making them somewhat part of this conflict. And now, even from a distance, they're watching the Flamingo missile closely. While North Korea isn't within range, the message is still loud. If Ukraine can build something this advanced under wartime pressure, what's next? That kind of progress could make countries like North Korea nervous. It's not about being in the crosshairs today, it's about what could be possible tomorrow. The Flamingo shows that Ukraine's tech is evolving fast, and that kind of momentum makes distant allies rethink how safe they really are. Russia's ability to support its own allies is also taking a hit. With more resources tied up defending its own territory, it often has less to offer abroad. That's exactly what happened when Syria needed it the most, and it wasn't there, leading to the collapse of Bashar's regime a little while back. Currently, this detachment means fewer missiles for Iran, less artillery for proxy groups, and slower shipments to friendly regimes. The Flamingo doesn't just hit targets, it disrupts supply chains. And when supply chains break, influence fades. Russia's global reach is shrinking, not because of sanctions alone, but because it now has to look inward. It has to protect its own backyard before it can help anyone else. This shift is being watched by countries outside of the conflict, too. Taiwan, for example, is paying close attention. For years, they've lived under the shadow of China's military power. But now, Ukraine has shown that innovation can level the playing field. The Flamingo wasn't built by a superpower, but by a country under siege. That sends a message. If Ukraine can do it, why not Taiwan? Why not any country that feels threatened but lacks the numbers or the budget to match its rivals? The Flamingo also proves that reach and precision matters more than size. That kind of thinking could inspire Taiwan to invest more in long-range systems, stealth tech, and AI-guided weapons. It could push them to develop tools that don't just defend, but deter, and that shift could change how China approaches its own strategy. If Taiwan starts building its own version of the Flamingo, the balance in the region could tilt. It wouldn't take thousands of missiles, just enough to make China hesitate. That is the power of innovation. It doesn't need to match, it just needs to disrupt. Russia knows this. That's why it's already likely thinking about technology transfer. Capturing a Flamingo missile and reverse engineering it would be a huge win. It would give them an insight into Ukraine's design, its guidance systems, and its production methods. But that's easier said than done. The Flamingo is built to be hard to track, hard to intercept, and hard to recover. Even if Russia gets a hold of one, replicating it won't be easy. Ukraine's edge isn't just in the missile, it's in the thinking behind it. The design is lean, efficient, and built for wartime conditions. That kind of mindset isn't easy to copy. Still, the risk is there. If a Flamingo crashes or is shot down, Russia will try to learn from it. They'll study the casing, the electronics, and the software, and they won't be the only ones. Other countries might want a piece of it too. That's why Ukraine has to be careful. Every launch carries the risk of exposure, but the benefits outweigh the risks. The Flamingo is doing more than damage, it's shifting the global conversation. Countries that used to sit on the sidelines are now paying attention. They're seeing how a small, determined nation can build something that changes the game. They're watching how Russia, a major power, is being forced to react, to defend, and to explain. And they're learning. The Flamingo is more than a missile. It's a blueprint that shows that smart design, local talent, and urgency can produce results that ripple across continents. Even countries that aren't directly involved are feeling the effects. Venezuela, for example, has ties to Russia through oil and trade. But if the Flamingo starts hitting pipelines or refineries, those ties become liabilities. Disruption in Russia's energy flow affects everyone connected to it. Prices go up, deals fall through, and alliances start to wobble. The Flamingo doesn't need to hit every target, it just needs to hit the right ones. And when it does, the fallout spreads far and wide. China is also watching carefully. Their support for Russia has been cautious but steady. Now with the Flamingo in play, that support comes with more risk. If the war escalates and if Ukraine starts targeting deeper into Russian territory, China could be pulled in. That's not a scenario they want. The Flamingo adds a layer of unpredictability. It makes the conflict harder to control, harder to predict, and harder to contain. And that kind of uncertainty makes allies nervous. The Flamingo missile hasn't just rattled Russia, it's rewritten the rules. It shows that a nation under siege can still build something powerful enough to shift the global chessboard. Now, Russia's allies are second-guessing their loyalties. Distant nations are rethinking their defenses. And the old idea of safety by distance is fading fast. Ukraine hasn't just launched a missile, they've launched a message. One that says innovation isn't reserved for superpowers. And deterrence doesn't need a massive arsenal. The Flamingo is fast, precise, and disruptive, and its impact is already stretching far beyond the battlefield. The world is watching, not just because of what it hits, but because of what it means. Thanks for watching.